Welcome, everybody, to the NFL show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm your co-host for the NFL show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in, as usual, my co-host, Sam Teets. How you doing, Sam?
I'm doing great, Mike. How about you?
All right. And today we have a special guest. He's an NFL and NHL writer for the Grueling Truth, and he is not the president of the Carson Wentz fan club. Help me welcome to the show, Sam McGinnis. How you doing, Sam?
I'm doing pretty great.
All right. Today we're going to break down our top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL today. And I know we've seen a lot of people have this debate on who's better, Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes. And some people are dumb enough to think that it's Lamar Jackson, but we'll get to that here in a little bit. Sam Teets, who are you going to start off with at number 10?
Yeah, I'll start this off. We're going to go with number 10, and I think there's a couple of guys who could fight for the 9-10 spots. My number 10 is actually Matt Stafford. And I think some people hate on Matt Stafford a little bit unnecessarily just because of some of the struggles they've had in recent years. But you look at the past 8 games. I mean, he only played half the season, but he was pacing 4,998 yards and 38 passing touchdowns with the Lions before he got hurt and before he got put on the IR. So it's going to be probably the best year of his entire career. I know the Lions were 3-4-1, but a lot of those were close losses. I think Detroit, as a team, has a lot of potential. I just think they haven't reached it yet. So I know McGinnis is like, I've heard this so much before, but I think Matt Stafford is deserving of a 10 spot. I think he's deserving number 10.
Yeah, I was thinking somewhere around the upper end of the top 10. If you looked at it, he was pacing. He had first before his injury. He was first in passing yards per game. He was sixth in passer rating. There's another thing he's first in. I forgot, but yeah, he was doing well.
Yeah, I think Matt Stafford's biggest problem is just being in Detroit, and the organization is not very well run, and they don't really put the people around him to be successful.
At least their offensive line.
But he has gotten the Lions to the playoffs. He has gotten the Lions to the playoffs. Most people never do that. Sam McGinnis, who do you got at number 10?
So number 10. Y'all may not like me for this. I'm going Matt Ryan on that one.
Okay. Why wouldn't we like you for that?
I get don't worry about it. I just don't worry about it.
That's not a bad pick, Sam. I'm going to tell you that's not a bad selection. I know Matt Ryan this past year didn't have the best year of his career. I know he missed a game. But even if you look back to what he did in 2018, I mean, his 2018 season was almost as good as his 2016 one. So it's not like he's a bad quarterback. It's not like he's fallen off a cliff. He's still a very productive quarterback. I just think last year took a little bit of a step back. And the Falcons as a team as a whole are kind of just stuck in the middle area between being competitive and being rebuilding. So to me, I think Stafford's like a top 13 guy. I don't have him in my top. I mean, Ryan's not like the top 13 guy. I don't have him in my top 10. But at the same point, I can understand why you have him there.
I would have probably had him around 11 or 12. So I don't think it's a bad pick. My number 10, Dallas Cowboy fans will hate this, but I got Dak Prescott. I think Dak Prescott is a very good quarterback. You look at his numbers. I mean, in 4 seasons, he's completed 66% of his passes. He's averaged almost 4,000 yards per season. He's a good quarterback. So I don't think it's far-fetched to say that he's a top 10 quarterback. I actually think it'd be crazy to not have him in the top 10. But I still say he has trouble throwing guys open. I don't think he's worth the amount of money he wants. And I still think Sam Teets, in the long run, they may be better off with Andy Dalton in a $3 million contract and be able to put enough players on that defense to make this a Super Bowl contender.
Well, yeah, I had a discussion with some friends of mine today about the same thing. I'm like, if your options are between paying Andy Dalton, I mean, he's got to get a new deal next offseason, but it's between paying Andy Dalton like $15 million a year versus paying Dak Prescott $35 million a year. Why not just go with Andy Dalton? Because honestly, Zeke Elliott is the engine of that team anyways. I mean, really, that's what it is. If you don't have Zeke, that offense isn't going to run anyways. We saw Prescott throw over 4,900 yards this past season, and they didn't make the playoffs. So really, I think this team comes down to how Zeke performs, not necessarily how Dak performs. So in my opinion, he's not worth the $35 million just because of his role in the team, what we've seen Dallas do in the past. So really, I agree with you. I think if the option is between paying Dak $35 million and taking a risk on a guy like Andy Dalton or even a guy like Jameis Winston, I mean, if you can get him for $10 million or less a year, I would go with one of those guys.
I wouldn't go with Winston, but
Yeah.
I can tell you this. Andy Dalton, I think, is very similar to Dak Prescott in that if you put the guys around them, they can take you to a Super Bowl. They're not a guy that you're just going to put on the team like a Russell Wilson or a Deshaun Watson, and all of a sudden they're making the team win more games. They're more guys that have to be more of a cog than the main piece. My number 9 is Matthew Stafford. And I think he continues to fly under the radar. Last year, he was on pace to throw for 4,998 yards, 38 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions before an injury ended the season after 8 games. And at the time of his injury, he ranked 2nd in touchdown passes, 4th in yards per attempt, 5th in passer rating. And it just kind of goes on and on there. And I think that this year, I think the Lions are going to be improved. I think they can be a 7 or 8 win team. And I think with no Jim Bob Cooter offensive system, I think they'll be more focused on the short passes, playing into Darrell Bevel's system, which I think is going to help him even more, and also help him with, a lack of an offensive line. Sam Teets, what do you got?
Well, no, I totally agree with you on that one. I got Deion Swift and you don't have Kerryon Johnson had to be your main back right now. So I trust Detroit. Oddly enough, I don't usually say that, but I think I trust Detroit to win 7 or 8 games. But if we're going down a spot to my number 9. I have Dak Prescott at number 9, actually. I got Dak at 9. This past year, like I said, threw for over 4,000 yards for the first time in his career, so I'm not sure he's going to repeat his throwing performance in 2020 just because it's such an outlier. He threw for more than 1,000 yards over his previous personal record, so I don't know if he'll throw for that many yards again. But I still think, based on what he's done in the first 4 years of his career, I mean, he's 40-24 as a starter. He's gotten Dallas to the playoffs twice. I think he's deserving of having a top 10 spot. I don't think that's a stretch at all. I just don't think he's an elite quarterback. I don't think he's like a top 5, top 7 type guy.
All right, Sam McGinnis, number 9.
I think with number 9, I'm going to go with Carson Wentz. Actually, you see, this is where
Carson Wentz. Hold on, wait a second. You're the guy who a month or so ago was on here saying the Eagles needed to move on from him.
So here's what I'll say. I actually heard something from someone between now and then that I thought was interesting. I guess it makes sense. But the difference between backup quarterbacks and starting quarterbacks is consistency. And although Nick Foles did very well, he did point out how it was rather inconsistent. I'm still not sure, and this is something I wanted to cover, I'm still not sure exactly what I would do with him. I obviously keep him around for this season, but like Sam Teets, for instance, let's say you go 3/4 of the way through the season and he's out for the rest of the season again. Like, is there a point at which you eventually move on from a great player because of that, or is that just irrelevant?
No, there's a point where you would eventually move on from a great player because of that. I just don't think it's this year. I mean, honestly, you're talking about, I don't know how long the contract extension he signed is. If you're talking about like 2 or 3 years now down the line, I could see that. But honestly, I don't think it's this year. I mean, just look at last season. They had so many injuries to everyone else, literally at every other position group on that team. And Carson Wentz was the only guy who was healthy throughout the entire regular season for them. And he basically carried them to the playoffs with Greg Gore as the top receiver on the team. So to me, I think you don't get rid of Carson Wentz. You don't move on from a guy who's that talented unless you see it happen over a course of like extended period of time. I don't think you're there yet in terms of having to be ready to move on from him because of injuries.
Well, how about this, Sam McGinnis? How about this? What if he breaks his arm or breaks his leg? I mean, is that really injury prone? I mean, I think a lot of this is according to what kind of injury you're talking about also.
Well, it's also consistency. He's had, 4 or 5 injuries in the 4 years he's played?
Yeah. He's had a few, but
I was looking at it. It's like it was one more injury than every year he's played. But I think those 2 injuries happened at the same time, so we can just count that as 1 injury per year. So it depends there because, like, for me, the consistency at the end of the day, it's just like it's irrelevant because if he does keep getting injured, eventually you do have to move on. I'm not sure if I would do that this season. I would definitely keep him around at least.
Well, let me say this, Tim, again, because Carson Wentz has played more games for the past 4 years, I think, than Aaron Rodgers. So, and I don't really hear people talking about Aaron Rodgers having issues with consistency and being on the field. Even his injury in the wild card game against the Seattle Seahawks, that wasn't really, I wouldn't say it was his fault. I mean, he got slammed by Jadeveon Clowney on a controversial hit from behind.
Well,
and ended up hurting his head. That's not really something he can control as opposed to like something that happens to your leg or something that happens to your arm. A concussion is a little bit different.
Well, and here's the thing. There's at least one difference between those two people. Aaron Rodgers is around for the playoffs and Wentz is not, or at least hasn't been. Just that's factual. He hasn't been. Aaron Rodgers, on the other hand, I mean, he helped his team get to the conference finals. Now, as for injuries, again, I'm going to go back to the point which it doesn't really matter whose fault it is as long as it's consistent and the problem is there. It's unfortunate, and you don't like seeing especially good people getting hurt, but it happens.
That's true. But also, I could see concussion is more of a freak injury, though. It's not something that's going to be patterned, basically.
I thought you were more prone for concussions after the first one.
Yeah, so that means last year, outside of a hit where he got a concussion, he pretty much played the whole season, and he played good enough to take a team that probably wasn't good enough to go to the playoffs all the way to the playoffs. How about this? What if for the next 5 years he gets hurt and knocked out 4 times, but in one of those years he stays healthy and you win a Super Bowl? Is it worth keeping him then?
Pardon me, I was trying to plug something in. I think when
I mean, my point is this. I mean, he's a guy that is good enough to win an MVP and take you to the Super Bowl. I would think that unless this is still happening for the next 2 or 3 years, as Sam said, I think you just got to kind of roll with him and make sure you got a good backup.
And Jalen Hurts at backup, so it's not the worst case scenario anyways. You got some out there who's athletic enough to go make plays. I think you don't have to move on from Carson Wentz. I don't think there's any kind of panic there in Philadelphia. Especially because you're not going to find someone as good as Carson Wentz, so you try to replace him. You're just not going to find someone like that.
Yeah, because you're talking about you've got him in your top 10, Sam. So that means out of 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL, he is better than 23 of them. So I mean, it's going to be hard to replace him with somebody that's a top 10 quarterback.
Well, for sure. And here's something I actually kind of liked what you said, because if you actually just kept Nick Foles around in the first place, you could potentially still work with that system, because what's the saying? Don't fix what's not broken. It's something like that. But their system wasn't doing poorly. Like, you made it to the Super Bowl, you won it. You made it to the second round. If I wonder what would have happened if they had just kept Nick Foles around in case Carson continuously got hurt.
Well, I don't know if they could have done that financially.
Well, okay.
Yeah, you can't do it financially.
If they could have, that would have been.
You can't do it financially. And the other thing is this: if Nick Foles is so good, I mean, why has Nick Foles got to battle for Mitch Trubisky for the job in Chicago? So, I mean, I think what you had is in Philadelphia 2 years ago, you had a complete football team. I would say this, though: if Nick Foles starts that entire season, I don't think they're in the Super Bowl. I mean, the majority of that season was the work of Carson Wentz to get them the record they had to put them in position to make that run.
Yeah, that may be a fair assessment. I would like to see what would happen if he had a chance from wild card going on, or if he got his team, the Bears, to the second round for starts. I would like to see what would happen. But yeah, I think maybe the best case scenario, or one of them, would have been if they could have financially supported having both those quarterbacks around.
All right, Sam, what do you got at number 8? McGinnis.
Number 8, I'll go tie between Matthew Stafford and Dak Prescott. That's what I got. I know we talked about both of them already, so I'm not sure how much we really need to go into that.
All right. My number 8's Aaron Rodgers. And actually, I did a little research, just a little bit, because we all know I don't do much. But when I was looking at this, it surprised me how many places Sam Teets didn't even have Aaron Rodgers on this list. And I think Aaron Rodgers, they were limited offensively with wide receivers last year, and he still got them to the NFC Championship game. And I don't think that team was talented enough to get there. But Aaron Rodgers, like the Russell Wilsons and guys like that, are good enough to drag a team and make them better than what they are. So I think even though he's getting up there in age, and even though I do think that he has shown some slight decline, I think number 8 for Aaron Rodgers is about right, even though I know you guys probably both got him higher.
I'm just a little bit higher, honestly, not that much higher. But, yeah, I think the reason people snub Aaron Rodgers when they talk about this kind of stuff is that he's not the Aaron Rodgers we knew back around 2011, 2013. So when he won those MVP awards, you look back, he was just different when he was winning those MVP awards. He was much better than he is now. he was throwing for 38 to 45 touchdowns a year. He was throwing for 4,500 yards regularly, and he was still only throwing single-digit interceptions. And he's also completing more percentage of his passes than he is now. But again, it's just because the people surrounding him are no longer as good as they used to be. He used to have guys like Jordy Nelson, Dallas Driver, Greg Jennings, Randall Cobb, all on the same team. And this past year was Devontae Adams, then extras pretty much in terms of the receiving core. So it's a much different team. I can't blame Aaron Rodgers for all of it. His completion percentage has dropped off significantly since his MVP years. He's not throwing for as many touchdowns. He only threw 4 interceptions, though. This is a guy who's probably – I think he has the career record for touchdown to interception ratio in NFL history. I still think he's a top 10 quarterback. I have him a little bit higher than you do.
All right. Who do you got, Sam, at number 8, I guess?
I think.
Well,
yeah,
you did your 8, McGinnis.
I do want to add to what he said, though. With Kevin Love coming in, I actually heard something interesting. If this is accurate, the last quarterback drafted in the first round to not start within the first 2 years may have actually been Aaron Rodgers. So I'm curious to see how that will go down. I don't think it would be the right move to put Kevin Love in within the next 2 years. Jordan Love, pardon me. But I think, that's a basketball player, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I can't believe you. I can't believe you said it. I can't believe you know a basketball player. But go ahead.
I was actually watching the Lakers Clippers game last night. I know almost nothing about basketball, but I enjoyed that.
You did?
But yeah, I think they should keep Aaron Rodgers around for some more years to come, or at least
all right
for a while.
Go ahead, Sam Teets, number 7 or 8.
Actually, my number 8 still, but I think number 8 to number 6 are all kind of look close to me. I've got Wentz at 8. I could see an argument made for 7 based on some of the things he's done early in his career. I've got him at 8 still just because I would like to see him get closer to what his MVP caliber performance was in 2017. I would like to see him get back to that. I knew he set a career high for passing yards this past season, and he's only thrown 21 interceptions over the past 3 years. He's been highly consistent in that regard. So I really like what Carson Wentz has done so far in his career. I'm just waiting for him to take it to another level and kind of get back to where he was in 2017, where he's going to be a top 5 quarterback in the league. I think he has the potential for sure. I just don't know if he's done necessarily over the past 2 years.
How about this? I've got Carson Wentz at number 7, and I believe that last year was more impressive than the 2017 season. And the reason I say that is at one point, the Eagles receiving core, which was decimated by injuries last year, had Wentz throwing to the likes of Greg Ward, who was a college quarterback at Houston, and Mac Hollins. The team's leading receiver was Alshon Jeffrey, who missed 6 full games and finished with only 490 yards. The team's top 2 leading pass catchers were tight ends Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. And when you look at that, the fact that he still managed to complete 64% of his passes for over 4,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, 7 picks, and a 93 passer rating, I know those numbers aren't what he had in 2017. But, Sam, to me, when I look at this and look at what he was working with, I think last year showed us how good he was because, to me, the fact that he got that team to the playoffs would be more impressive than taking the 2017 team to the Super Bowl.
Well, yeah, just to give you an idea of what he was working with, like you already mentioned the receivers, but his top 2 tight ends, Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, they combined for 146 receptions, about 1,500 yards, and 11 touchdowns. The receivers, the top 4 wide receivers on the entire team, combined for fewer receptions, yards, and touchdowns than the top 2 tight ends. The top 2 running backs are almost as productive in terms of receiving yards as top 4 receivers. I mean, he really wasn't working with any weapons there in terms of pass catchers. So I can see what you're saying exactly. And honestly, that final month of the season for him, he was phenomenal in the final month. He completed 66% of his pass attempts for 1,500 yards and 10 touchdowns, only 1 interception in the final month of the season, and the Eagles went 4-1. So I think he's on the path to being an elite quarterback. You can make the argument he already is.
All right, McGinnis, number 7.
So number 7 actually goes to Aaron Rodgers for me, but I think I might actually flip them with the last 2 I was talking about. I think over years past, I definitely would have put Aaron Rodgers above Matthew Stafford, but I think with the 2 we had before, Dak Prescott and Matthew Stafford, I'll flip those around and put him at 8 and them at 7.
How about this, Sam? Would you rather have Aaron Rodgers as starting quarterback this year for the Lions, or would you rather have Matthew Stafford?
That's a fair point. I ain't gonna say anything about that. That's a fair point.
Who would you rather have?
I probably would have put Aaron Rodgers. So I'll keep it then. I'll keep it.
Okay. That was easy. Number 7, Teets.
Yeah, my number 7 is Deshaun Watson. I've loved what Deshaun Watson's done ever since college because I'm going to Clemson. I'm a Clemson guy. I love watching him play when he was in college. I thought he should have been taken higher than he was in the draft. He only fell to 12th overall. As a rookie, he was phenomenal before he got hurt. I think the past 2 years he's been very good, very consistent, despite having some issues, especially on the offensive line in Houston. They really don't have an offensive line there. It's really just Laramie Tunsil, left tackle, and that's pretty much it. So I think he's done a great job considering the pieces that have been around him. I do think he's still a little bit short of where I would put like the top 5 guys. He's just not there yet, in my opinion. I need to see some playoff success besides just being Buffalo this past year. I need to see a little bit more from him. But if I'm right about what Deshaun Watson can be, this guy will be a top 4 quarterback within the next 2 years.
Yeah, I've got him number 6, so we'll go ahead and start off there. And as a rookie, you got to remember, behind a bad offensive line, the Texans were 3-3 when he was the starting quarterback. Then he gets hurt. With him hurt, they're 1-9. And in his first full season as a starting quarterback, he operated behind the league's worst offensive line. He got sacked 62 times, but he still completed almost 70% of his passes for a little over 4,100 yards, 26 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. So even though he doesn't have Hopkins, instead, he's going with Kenny Stills, Will Fuller, Randall Cobb, and Brandon Cooks, I think he's still going to have a very successful season, and hopefully they get Bill O'Brien out of there before he ruins him. All right, McGinnis, number 6.
I have Kirk Cousins at 6.
Huh?
Kirk Cousins. So you want to take a look at over years. From 2015 to 2018, he had more than 4,000 yards. His completion percentage was upper 60s, minus 1 year for that period was 70.1 for one of those years. This last year, it was 69.1, 26 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, 107.4 rating. I mean, that's not bad.
He's been
all right.
Been
I want to bring this up, though. Okay. This is what I want to bring up. Carson Wentz, you rip on because he hadn't done anything in the playoffs. Kirk Cousins hasn't either.
He just won a playoff game this past year.
Yeah, he won a playoff game. Good for him. He's also been in the league how much longer than Wentz? And I don't see how you can have Kirk Cousins
for most of that time.
Yeah.
The Redskins.
What's your point?
The Redskins stink. Their organization is garbage. Actually, they're not even the Redskins anymore. They're just a football team. That's how you know it's bad.
Football team. Yeah. But when I look at this, I mean, really, if you had a choice, if you were going into the playoffs right now with your Detroit Lions, and you could have Carson Wentz or him, Kirk Cousins.
I would take Cousins for the sole reason that you can't trust Carson. Plus, Kirk just straight up.
You can't trust him? He's already healthy. We're going into a playoff game.
Healthy for how long?
For a playoff game, hopefully. I mean, I just don't understand. Exactly. The rip on Kirk Cousins, though, is this. He doesn't even perform well in prime time. I mean, Carson Wentz has performed big time in prime time. Maybe not in the playoffs yet, but I don't know. I think the Kirk Cousins at number 6 is absolutely absurd, but that's your opinion.
He also got them to the conference championship a couple years back, so there's also that. It's not that he's had a lack of playoffs. When did
Kirk Cousins get to the conference championship?
Versus the Eagles before they went to the Super Bowl?
No, he wasn't there. That was Case Keenum.
Oh, pardon me. That was Case Keenum.
Yeah, that wasn't Kirk Cousins.
Oh, geez.
I was thinking Vikings.
Yeah,
Steve Risley, if you're watching, we should have had you on.
Well, let me add this. I mean, you mentioned Kirk Cousins struggling in primetime. I mean, that's a serious issue. Legitimately, look back at his schedule from this past year. They lost both games against the Green Bay Packers. They lost against the Kansas City Chiefs. They lost against the Dallas Cowboys. They lost against the Seattle Seahawks. The only notable win I could say that they had on their schedule was potentially against Philadelphia in Week 6. That's arguably the only notable win they had the entire season. Other than that, they were losing to all the competitive teams they played against. So I do think the Vikings have issues. I think Kirk Cousins is a top 13 kind of guy, I think. He's consistent, but he's just not there when you need him the most at times. I still think it's a good It's a fair criticism to say he doesn't show up in prime time. And I think, well, he's always going to be a good quarterback. I don't think he's truly a top 10 guy right now.
Well, and I think this. I don't think, as Sam said, he was in Washington, not a lot of talent there. Minnesota, they do have talent. Let's see what he does. I just think this. From what I thought he would be coming out of college, I think he's been a disappointment because I'm one of the people that actually thought he was better than RG3 when they drafted him both back-to-back. Teets, what do you got at number 6?
Yeah, number 6, this is where I have Aaron Rodgers, so I have him 2 spots higher than you, I think. For a lot of reasons that we already talked about. Just the receiver core he was working with wasn't that great last year. Devontae Adams is a really good player. I think Devontae Adams is a top 7 to 5 receiver in the league. But, I mean, he missed a bunch of games last year. I think he missed like 4 games, so he wasn't there the entire time. Aaron Rodgers still somehow gets Green Bay to 13-3. I think we can all agree about watching the Packers. We didn't think they were a 13-3 team, but they still end up going 13-3. They make the conference championship. They end the game walloped by the San Francisco 49ers. But at the same point, they should have never been that far. They should have never won 13 games. And really, if you're going to ask who's responsible for them overachieving, it's Aaron Rodgers. And it has to be Aaron Rodgers because that offense, without him, is absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I don't like Aaron Rodgers, but he makes his team better, and he's taken a lot of teams a lot farther than what they should have. Teets, what you got at number 5?
My number 5 is Drew Brees. Now, I think there are more concerns about Drew Brees this year than I've had in the past.
Yeah.
Mostly because what we saw from happen last year, he missed some time. He hasn't missed time in a while, but he ends up missing a handful of games. He misses 5 games. And then in the playoffs, just did not look right. I mean, he completed 78.8% of his pass attempts in that playoff game. But for only 208 yards, a touchdown, and interception. So he didn't show up in the playoffs. He really didn't perform that well. And I think it's a time where we're seriously have to consider now that Drew Brees is probably getting fatigued towards the end of the regular season. I think honestly, that's what happened. He ran out of juice when they needed him to in the playoffs. So I think the Saints are kind of handicapped a little bit going forward. So I don't know what he's going to be like when it comes time to actually play a playoff game.
Yeah, and that's my concern also. I've got him at number 5 also. When you look at this team, they should be better than last year. They went out and they added Emmanuel Sanders to bolster a group led by the great Michael Thomas. The offensive line already one of the league's best. Added first-round pick Cesar Ruiz to the interior. So unless Brees finally feels the effects of the aging, I think he remains in the top 5. But I really think if we were to do this at the end of the season, hopefully we'll have a season, I don't think Drew Brees will be in my top 10 when all's said and done because I expect from looking at the last couple of years, he's going to kind of peter out as the season goes on. And I think it really helped him last year to have a 6-week break right in the middle. And I think that helped him get through. The problem now is you don't have Teddy Bridgewater as the backup quarterback. So if he has to miss a few games, what happens then? So I think Drew Brees at number 5, but I think it's number 5 just because I would feel crazy for not having Drew Brees in a top 5. But Sam McGinnis, what do you think? Who do you got at number 5?
Number 5, I actually have Deshaun Watson. I mean, we went over him a little bit, but yeah, with no offensive line, I mean, the offensive line, I would almost argue, is the most important positions on the entire football field because you can't pass as well, run as well. You can't really do anything offensively as well without an offensive line, and Deshaun Watson was still able to pull some crap out of his butt and do some great things with that team. So I think, you definitely have to give credit to him there. And it's just a lot harder when you're not as much of a spotlight like Lamar Jackson, where you've got all that talent surrounding you. Now, he did have DeAndre Hopkins, but without an offensive line, it becomes much harder.
Yeah, I'll make this statement. If you gave me a choice between Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson to start a football team with, I'm taking Deshaun Watson. And I don't even think it's close.
You're not crazy for saying that because I know Lamar has shown his ability to be a really flashy player and to be able to be a really successful player. But I think at the same time, Deshaun Watson won a championship when he was in college. We know he can win games. And he's a better passer right now. Lamar Jackson has, I think, threw like 3,200 yards this past year. He did throw for a league-leading touchdowns, but I don't know about his consistency. I don't know if he's going to be a consistently great passer going forward. I trust Deshaun Watson's arm more than I trust Lamar Jackson's right now.
All right, Sam McGinnis, number 4.
Number 4, I'm putting Drew Brees there. probably. I am concerned about him falling off a cliff over the next couple of years. Unfortunately, everybody's career has to end at some point. I do have liked the efficiency he has had over the years, but yeah, I think his time might be coming here pretty quick.
All right, Sam.
Yeah, my number 4 right now is Tom Brady. Now, I think Tom Brady had a little bit of issues last year, but that wasn't really his fault. I think the offense around him was pretty bad. They traded for Mohamed Sanu, who was supposed to come in and really help him out. He really didn't. Mohamed Sanu looked really tired and fatigued this past year. He looked very slow. Even Julian Edelman, towards the end of last year, he's been very consistent for them over the years, but he was dropping passes towards the end of the year. So, frankly, the whole offense just didn't look right during the season. I mean, Philip Dorsett was their second best receiver on that team. That tells you a lot about what Brady was working with. So I don't think he had a great cast around him. I think in Tampa Bay, he'll far outperform what he did this past year. My question is just, I want to see – he's 43 years old, or he's going to be 43 years old in a couple of days. I'm never betting against Tom Brady. I'll never do it again because I bet against him playing times in the past and always comes back to bite me. So I'm betting on Tom Brady being good this year. I'm putting him at number 4.
All right, I've got him at number 4 also, but he's kind of the opposite of Drew Brees. When I look at the weapons he's going to have, last year his season was basically destroyed because the Patriots weren't very good. They didn't have enough playmakers. He still threw 24 touchdown passes, only 8 interceptions. He had a passer rating of 88, which for most mere mortals would actually be, pretty decent. But now he's got Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Rob Gronkowski, O.J. Howard, Cameron Brate. Arguably, this is the deepest and best receiving core of his entire career. So I got him at number 4 right now. But this is one when we come back at the end of the season, it wouldn't surprise me if he's number 1 or 2 again.
And you can throw this out there. I'm actually about to say something good about Tom Brady. I heard an analogy that, funny enough, between Peyton Manning and Tom Brady about Tom Brady's move. I heard that it was like when Peyton Manning went to Denver. And I think I can see that a little bit. And Tom Brady's definitely improving what he has around him. So I wouldn't be too surprised to see a Super Bowl within the next 3 years.
Well, this is the thing. He's 43 years old, so that Super Bowl is going to probably have to be in the next year or two because there's one thing nobody beats, and that's Father Time, which eventually is going to catch up to him. But I also think I think it's insane to put Peyton Manning in the same conversation as Tom Brady as a quarterback.
Oof. Yeah, we've had that discussion before. We've had that discussion before.
Come on. So. Well, when they played each other, what was it, like 11-3 or something for Tom Brady? Tom Brady's got 6 Super Bowl rings. Peyton Manning is just everybody loves Peyton Manning because he's all shucks and he's basically full of crap. Number 3, are we in number 3, guys?
Yeah, number 3.
Sam Teets, what you got?
And my number 3 is Lamar Jackson, last year's MVP. I have questions about his consistency moving forward. So we've only really seen him perform at a high level for one season. He hasn't won a playoff game yet either. So there are issues here. His resume is incomplete. But at the same point, there is hope, I think, for him moving forward. I think Baltimore really has to address some of their receiving options. They don't have great receivers on the team right now. They got a couple in the draft. So I think the supporting cast around him is going to actually be better this year than it was last year, arguably. Although they did lose Marshall Yanda on the offensive line. He threw for a league-leading 36 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions, so he's not a turnover machine. I think that's what's really going to keep him afloat, is even if he struggles or has a more difficult time this coming season, if he doesn't turn the ball over a lot, I think he'll still be good enough, and the Baltimore team will still be good enough to go and win at least 10 games, based on just how good the defense is and just how consistent the running game has been at times for them.
Yeah, I've got him at number 3 also. I think people that rank him as number 1 are a little bit crazy. Hold on here. We have a question from a friend of the show, and that would be Troy Otratovich, who does the Go Big or Go Home podcast for us on thegruelingtruth.com, and he says, whoa, Sam, Brady that high. Can the Buccaneers protect him? He ain't moving out of the pocket. He ain't ever moved out of the pocket. But go ahead, Sam Teets. You can address this.
Yeah, no, I think the offensive line in Tampa Bay is a little bit underrated. They're not a fantastic line, don't get me wrong. They're not by any extent of imagination a very good offensive line. But I think they're good enough. And I think you've got Gronkowski, Cameron Brate, O.J. Howard, And now you've got Sean McCoy just signed a 1-year deal with them the other day. He's always been good out of the backfield, even at his extended age, where I know he's lost quite a few steps. So my thing with them is he doesn't have to drop back there every play and hold the ball for 5 or 6 seconds. They're going to have options for Brady to drop back and get the ball out as quickly as possible at times. And he'll still have chances to go deep too. He'll still capitalize on the deep shot with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. But they've got the weapons there that you don't need to go back in the pocket and hold it for 5, 6, 7 seconds. So in my opinion, I think the offensive line, again, good, not great. But I think you have plenty of weapons there that will help him out, especially Gronkowski. You've got connections with these guys. I don't think he's going to get sacked that often. I think he's going to be good about getting the ball out of his hands quickly.
All right. Sam McGinnis, number 3.
I also have Lamar Jackson at 3. The one thing that I will say is that moving forward for them on a bright note is that he takes what critics say about him and then turns that into work in that area. So I think if there's any place that he's being criticized, he could very well be better at that next year. And maybe he will be working on performing in the clutch as a result of playoff games last year. So I would actually say, bright future moving forward. The team is built for him, so I wouldn't be too surprised to see them do very well again.
All right, I've got Lamar Jackson at number 3 also. I think people to think he's on a level of Patrick Mahomes and Russell Wilson are basically smoking crack. I think Greg Roman has done a great job of innovating this offense to build it around him, as did the head coach John Harbaugh there. So I think he will be a great regular season quarterback for years to come. The question is, can he improve his footwork to be able to throw the short ball a little bit better? He throws a good deep ball. They've got a lot of receivers. They got a lot of running backs. They got a lot of weapons. So I think that his deficiencies, to me, Sam Teets, will be covered up in the regular season. But I think we're still going to see him get exposed in the playoffs like we did last year against Tennessee.
Well, yeah, especially when you go against a coach like Mike Vrabel has been a linebacker in the past who really comes up with creative ideas to stop opposing offenses. I think you're right. I think they will be able to just steamroll some teams in the regular season. We've seen that happen already, where they just drop back and just run the ball constantly down everyone's throats for 30 or 40 times a game, and you're able to win games like that. So I think that will cover up some of his issues during the regular season. I think you'll still have some of those fantastic shock and awe plays. But at the same point, once you get to the playoffs, and it's kind of a different level of preparation, different level of mental game planning. I think once you hit that point, Lamar's still going to have to come out there and add something to his game from this year, next year. Otherwise, you're going to see the same results.
All right, number 2, Sam Teets.
Now, number 1 and number 2, I think, are a little bit closer than everyone says. But my number 2 is still Russell
Just
Wilson.
give us 1, 2, because everybody, all 3 of us are going to have the same 1, 2, I think.
Yeah. Russell Wilson, number 2. Patrick Mahomes, number 1. And I think that's really what it is right now. I think you got 2 guys, future Hall of Fame quarterbacks, if they continue on the tracks that are on currently. I know it's really early for Mahomes, but looking at what he did in the first 2 years, I feel very comfortable saying that. And that's not something I take lightly. Wilson's been fantastic the last couple of years just because he's carried a Seahawks team that should not be a playoff caliber team, and he's gotten there consistently. He only has 1 year during his career where he hasn't won 10 games. He's a fantastic quarterback who carried a team that's undermanned for the most part to the playoffs almost every season of his career. On the other end, you got Patrick Mahomes, who has one of the most dynamic offenses in the NFL. But at the same point, he's taking advantage of the weapons around him. And in the first 2 years of his career as a starter, he's made it to the AFC Championship game and won a Super Bowl. I mean, it's about as accomplished as you can get through the first 2 years of your starting career.
All right. I would say this. If Russell Wilson was in Kansas City, would he win the Super Bowl?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
If Patrick Mahomes was in Seattle, would they make it to the playoffs?
I think so, because DK Metcalf's a very good deep threat. I think they have some deep options in Seattle that would pair well with Patrick Mahomes. I don't think it would be as good of a match, obviously, as Tyreek Hill and Cole Hardman. I think it'd be a different dynamic. I still think they would win, I'll say 9 to 11 games and make the playoffs.
All right, Sam McGinnis, what do you got at 1, 2?
Okay, so I actually have the reverse. I have Patrick Mahomes and then Russell Wilson. Obviously, Russell Wilson did straight up carry his team to the playoffs.
Wait a second. If you have the reverse, that means you got Russell Wilson number 1?
I do think it's very close, and I could definitely see how someone would see it either way. I do actually believe that Patrick Mahomes, in the end, could be a top 10, top 5 quarterback of all time when we're finally done with this, after he's won some more Super Bowls and such. Not that that necessarily is the requirement. But, yeah, I definitely liked the efficiency of Russell Wilson, especially you look at the first half of the season. He threw, what, one pick for however many touchdowns. And I think definitely with the team he had, it's something to be exceptional. And I think if you look at Patrick Mahomes, for the playoff games he played in, until those comebacks started, he kind of stank, especially during the Super Bowl. He was getting outplayed until like the fourth quarter by Jimmy Garoppolo. And I don't think there would be a quarterback that would be doing that against Russell Wilson, or at least it would be much closer. And I don't think Russell Wilson would have made the same mistakes. Now, that may be solved in time because he's still more of a rookie. So Patrick Mahomes may pass him in time, but I still say now Russell Wilson is just a little bit ahead of Patrick Mahomes.
Well, I think this. When you look at it, I think no quarterback continually does more with less than Wilson does. As I said, if he had the benefit of Andy Reid's, I mean, I'll say this.
Begging for an offensive line.
Russell Wilson is the best deep ball thrower in the NFL, but he's pretty damn good at throwing it short, too. Now, if he was with Andy Reid instead of being with Pete Carroll and Brian Schottenheimer, who seem hell-bent on establishing a run, much to Wilson's detriment, I think, I think that even with that, Wilson continually makes this work. He's continually in the playoffs. And if you run through the numbers, since he entered the league back in 2012, he's never missed a game. He's won 86 games. Only Tom Brady has won more in that span. And he's thrown for the 7th most yards and the 5th most touchdowns. I just think when you look at this, he's proven himself by getting the 2 Super Bowls and winning one. And I think he's proven himself even more by being able to take lesser talented teams to the playoffs. So I think when you look at these guys strictly through a quarterback coach's lens, what I see is Russell Wilson makes every throw. And I'll still say this, Patrick Mahomes eventually will also, but right now he has a problem with the hot routes, the hot reads. He has a tendency to throw low and behind guys or high and behind guys. Mahomes is a great quarterback, but let's face it, him and Lamar Jackson were both put into outstanding circumstances. Russell Wilson was also put into outstanding circumstances with one of the greatest defenses in NFL history. Russell Wilson went to the Super Bowl with that. He won it. Patrick Mahomes, in a great situation, went to the Super Bowl and won it. Lamar Jackson hasn't yet. Maybe he will this year. But I think the common denominator between the three of these is this. And it's not Mahomes and Jackson's fault because they're in good situations right now. The question is, what do they do when salary cap requirements make maybe Tyreek Hill disappear? The offensive line, not quite as good. You know, same thing in Baltimore. You got all this talent. They're all young. What happens when you have to let a few of them go? Are Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes able to take their team and elevate it no matter what's there? Because I think we've seen that with Russell Wilson, and that's why right now I still think Russell Wilson's the best quarterback. And maybe in 3 years, maybe Russell Wilson's behind both of them. I think that's entirely possible. But for right now, I'm just saying with Russell Wilson, to me, I mean, guys like Aaron Rodgers have proved themselves more by being able to drag teams that probably have no business being in the playoffs to an NFC championship game. So when I look at it, for me, what Russell Wilson is number one, and I don't even think it's a question. And I think there is no question that Patrick Mahomes is better than Lamar Jackson right now. And I think Lamar Jackson is very talented, and if he improves his ability to throw the short ball, Lamar Jackson might be the guy that's number one. And I think what's so special about this is Russell Wilson's not an old man yet. So the three of these guys and Deshaun Watson, those are the ones that really stand out to me. Those are the four guys that I think are going to basically become the face of the NFL over the next decade. You throw in a guy like Joe Burrow, maybe a guy like Trevor Lawrence next year, and I mean the NFL is set at least with a top 5 elite quarterbacks, I think, for the next decade, Sam Teets.
No, I totally agree with you there. I think the NFL, in terms of quarterback play, is actually in a pretty good spot, especially towards the top of the NFL. I think we said You mentioned guys who are kind of aging out of their primes right now. We talked about Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees. Some of those guys are a little bit older, kind of falling down our list. But again, you've got Russell Wilson who's going to be there for another 6 or 7 years. It's still going to be a very competitive quarterback. You got Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. We're just getting started. And again, guys like Deshaun Watson, Carson Wentz, even Dak Prescott, those guys are going to be around for a long time.
All right. And Joe Burrow probably should be on everybody's top 10, but I figured I would look like a homer if I put him there right now.
Well, you would.
I
wouldn't. Because I think he's
Cincinnati Bengals.
How about this? If you gave me a choice of these 10 guys, there's only 4 of them on this list that there's there's only 2 guys on this list I would take above Joe Burrow right now.
You haven't even seen him play in the NFL.
Now, a lot of that has to do with the fact that a lot of these guys are 36 or 43 years old, but still. Okay. I mean, the only 2 guys right now I would rather quarterback my team or maybe Russell Wilson and possibly Patrick Mahomes. And I think it's possible Burrow could be better than all these guys a few years from now, as long as the Bengals don't ruin his career.
Yeah. There's always a chance that happens.
There's a damn good chance that'll happen. So either that or the COVID will just wipe out football now that the Bengals have a legitimate quarterback. All right, Sam McGinnis, we going to be on tonight with a little NHL playoff preview?
Yeah, for all of you who are wondering, the NHL playoffs are back tomorrow at 12. I believe they start with the Rangers versus Hurricanes matchup. We're going to be talking about that. I'm actually going to have some of my predictions put into all of them put into the show tonight, minus maybe the Western Conference ones. But it should be exciting. I watched part of one of the exhibition games with Columbus, and they beat the Bruins 3-1. I would not be upset at all if the Bruins somehow just straight up died and fell off a cliff. So
all right, that is really rude and mean. Sam, you want to tell us where I can find you on Twitter?
Not literally.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at Sam_Teets33. I'm constantly posting new articles, polls, and stats there every day, so feel free to go check that out.
All right, Sam McGinnis, give everybody your Twitter so they can follow you and stalk you, especially the people that are Boston Bruins fans.
Oh, boy, yeah. Okay, so you can find me at Samuel McG22 on Instagram and Twitter. And I'm looking forward to tonight and covering the playoffs as we move throughout them.
Well, see, Teets, we're not going to be having McGinnis on anymore because he wears the shirts with the collars and make us look like slobs.
He does, really. He's showing us up
the same shirt every time.
He wears the same shirt all the time. He even wears it when he plays football. It's underneath his pads. He never takes his shirt off. It's a lucky shirt. All right, guys.
Assuming we ever get the pads back.
Yeah, we'll get him next
week. Still hiding them somewhere.
All right, we will be back Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern on the NFL show, so make sure you check us out live on Facebook or YouTube. Make sure you check out all of our podcasts at Grueling Truth with Twitter, thegruelingtruth.com, plus anywhere you find podcasts, including Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, you name it, The Grueling Truth is there. So for now, for Sam McGinnis, Sam Teets, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.